Hello, and thank you for joining us for this opening session on day two of the Device Authority Virtual Summit. My name is Tyler Gannon. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing and Strategic Alliances. Welcome. Yesterday, for those of you who joined us, we had some fantastic presentations from Nozomi Networks on the challenges of securing smart cities, Microsoft, and a bunch of others around automotive security and AI. And yours truly, me, on an approach to automating zero trust and connected device environments. Today, we'll definitely continue some of those themes, but we're going to introduce some new ones. We're going to hear from sponsor Cyfirma and the Virginia Innovation Partnership Corporation, or VIPC, on approaches to cyber defense, how it's being applied to critical infrastructure today. We'll listen to our partner Entrust on PQ and crypto agility, and several presentations from Microsoft on how these new technologies are shaping manufacturing supply chains today. To kick off today's event, I'm thrilled to welcome Rob Curtin, Director of Higher Education Strategy at Microsoft. Now, higher education in many ways serves as a test bed for the broader technology industry. AI certainly is no exception. So when you think about a higher education campus, think about it as a connected city with a very heterogeneous connected device environment, challenging user demands, coupled with a center of innovation in technology and ethical thinking about not only what technology can do, but how it should be used responsibly. I actually, in preparing for this kickoff, I was surprised, and I did the math that I've worked with and known Rob for almost 30 years. Rob, that'll make you feel old, but he's always surprised me with his depth of thought on any topic. I did take a sneak peek at this presentation, and I guarantee that you'll find his talk insightful. So, with that as a quick intro, Rob, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Tyler, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. My name is Rob Curtin, and to choose some pop culture from North America in the 70s, I feel like the fourth square on Sesame Street today. That was the square that was not like the others. So I appreciate all the work everyone is doing, particularly with device authority around zero trust to the edge where there are no people. But I look after worldwide higher education for Microsoft. So I'm not exactly like all of you. I don't pretend to be an expert in supply chain, but one thing that is generating momentum in all industries that I think is relevant for all of you, and I'd like to learn too, is the conversation of generative AI and its role in industry. And in higher education, I like to use the term, maybe inappropriately, but shock and awe. The shock when faculty discovered that students were writing papers with Chat GPT. And now the awe when they discover that, oh, it can be used to generate research grants. It can be used to customize admissions letters. It can be used to tailor content and create highly personalized lesson plans. It can be used to generate images. All of a sudden, there's awe of how they could use it and how we can really use it to personalize learning, improve reach. And so there's really this conversation that extends to all industry. And you have your experts, so I'd like to sort of take a step back. And our topic today would be, what are the conversations around AI foundations? We've been using AI in many forms, so we'll sort of define what AI is from our perspective, the importance of trust and governance. I understand that in this world, the conversation of zero trust is really first and foremost, but there's also cultural trust. There's issues around adoption. What does a generative pre-trained transformer actually mean? Yes, that's what GPT stands for. And then a little bit about practice culture and questions. This cool graphic on the right was a prompt that I issued yesterday for, I need to give a chat supply chain innovation and AI, give me a vivid picture. That's what it came back with. I'll let you determine whether it's good or bad, but I did not have to search the internet for weird clip art. I had it made for me in about 12 seconds. So that was kind of interesting. But I always like to start a conversation with any industry around what is Microsoft doing around AI? How do we balance both fear and excitement? And so sort of like that image, what I like to talk about is this combination of the brain and the heart. I've heard one person even draw an analog to the Wizard of Oz, if you remember the Wizard of Oz and the journey of going down the yellow brick road and who you meet. You meet someone who's looking for a brain, you meet someone who requires courage, and you meet someone who wants a heart. Having the courage to do something important, the brain to do it well, and the heart to do it right, is actually a timeless story. And so whether we're Frank L. Baum speaking about a mythical journey at the turn of the century for Dorothy, or the role of generative AI today, we need to combine this concept of being smart, but being true, being right, and being human. So we put in a prompt: draw me a picture, a photorealistic merging of the brain and the heart, vivid and alive. This was the clarity of the picture back in March. Notice, same engine, same prompt, different background, different results. And so one of the things that this brings up is also how careful we need to be, that unlike other computer programs where what you got was assured replication, assured precision, Six Sigma type of implementation, if these following inputs are put in, the exact same output will come in with a precise output. But with generative AI, it's not always the same. You need to date when your query was created. The language, the large language model, the pre-trained models get smarter, or maybe different. And so you're not always going to get the same output, which is why we need to think of this very differently than we have previous technology investments, for which we knew if the following parameters inputs were put in, the exact output came out. And so this means that AI becomes more complex. And this concept, many of you have heard it, prompt engineering, is a new role. And how we write prompts, how we think about them, is still an emerging art. And so this is a fairly common type. How do I explain AI to people who don't really understand AI? And oh, by the way, give me instructions on how to create a visualization in Excel. So note that it goes from very general to very specific. This is what we get. Notice the abstraction. Technology hasn't been known for abstraction. Think of a small orchestra. Very easy to understand the difference when there's only 3 or 4 musicians. Given my age, you could say, I can hear Geddy Lee play guitar. Rush had 3 musicians. But at the 4th of July celebration, which is an American event, the Boston Symphony Orchestra plays. There's more than 100 instruments. It's really tough to differentiate the 3rd chair of the violin. And so when this much larger orchestra is playing, it's much harder to isolate the contribution. And so how we start to think about that, here's the Excel sheet they told me to put together, by the way. And here's where not so good, right? Like, I put the sheet together just as they said, and it basically said, here's the complexity versus the explicability. And then it gave us a connect, show, and complexity chart, which I thoroughly didn't understand, and basically said, can you explain this? Because to me, I get the heat map stuff, but I don't really know how to explain it. And then it gave me, everything that I can say, like, okay, the upper left corner, that's low complexity, high explicability. It basically told me what the colors said. But it's interesting that it also goes in and starts to help us. So if you start to think about all of industry, you now have responsive, adaptive, customizing, adjusting, learning conversations between what essentially is you and a machine. We're still trying to figure out sort of what that means. But from a Microsoft standpoint, one brand you'll see us start to come out in all of our products is called Copilot. You'll see Copilot for Microsoft 365. This is the Office suite. And so instead of showing you, or instead of telling you rather, I have a video that I'll just show how Copilot is going to change experiences across the family of what used to be called Office, is now Microsoft 365, because it's inclusive of security, data intelligence, workflow. So let me play this video now. was a little bit of fun. Office is still Office. Teams is still Teams, but now you have a co-pilot. The co-pilot that works alongside you. It can do things like help me optimize my day, get all the slides started for me, record a transcript and summarize the meeting, because I was really bad at that, quite honestly, and now it just does it. You'll see Copilot across all of our products. Security Copilot, which is one that you may be very interested in and already aware of, is continually building on top of our incident event management infrastructure, Azure Sentinel. It's monitoring, summarizing events, creating and generating alerts and summaries of the day. Power Platform, it's literally writing code for you. And in GitHub, it's automatically deploying shared code, deploying it to Azure, writing the scripts. And so we don't know yet, like every great innovation, where everyone's going to take this. What we're finding, sixth graders, in many cases, are telling us before anybody else. And so one thing that I like to do is just ground us that AI isn't new, right? AI has been around since really 60s from a practical standpoint, versions of it, with computers in the size of rooms were being done. What we're talking about more recently is terms like GPT-4, the consumer offering from OpenAI called Chat GPT, are based on what's called large language models. There are open source tools to help train these large language models, and you'll definitely see alternatives, and already are seeing lots of alternatives out there for AI based on large language models that continually learn from a broad set of tasks and then generate images, text, code, etc. When we think about the 50s is when artificial intelligence first came to mind, and then we remember when Deep Blue beat Kasparov in chess. That was really based on machine learning algorithms that went through the permutations super fast to try to determine the best set of outcomes. Deep learning was a new technique based on neural networks in really sort of commercialized in 2017 to help you sort of analyze, predict, identify, and make better decisions based on expected outcomes rather than just on reporting around what happened. Machine learning and deep learning started to say, well, here's what we expect is going to happen based on massive amounts of data. As that applies to supply chain, Microsoft, in our phrase, would eat our own dog food. Most of you think of us as a software and now a cloud services company, but we're a massive hardware company too. And like any other company, we have massive supply chain challenges. This is from 2017. What we began, right, was the digital transformation of our supply chain, much like yours, very distributed. Of course, we had margin pressure. Of course, we had customers who wanted everything right now. A large variety of suppliers on one side, with a massive variety of distributors and retailers on the channel side. And so as we increasingly were asked to innovate, get things to market, well, we had to better understand, how are we going to get this to Best Buy and their stores all across North America? What's the product mix? How do we understand inventory? These are standard sort of reporting-based metrics. And as we understand where we are and its monitoring and awareness, then we add in the innovation of IoT, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I've got better data, I can aggregate it, but now I'm getting IoT insight and what we call track and trace, and the innovation of environments like blockchain and capabilities of device authority. So I can now trust data coming from IoT devices on ships, in the warehouse, from the truck, from a distribution point. And now we're able to project, okay, where are we in real time on critical supply chain issues, either inbound to our factories or outbound to our resellers. But this is still extending the predictive analytics. You can see one flying over Alaska right now. The predictive analytics coupled with IoT for monitoring and tracking to let us know what's on time, what's behind, how do we adjust. And now we're getting into integrating other sources like weather patterns. Again, it gets smarter, the data gets larger, the volume, the veracity, the variety of the data. These are the same conversations we really had 9 years ago. We just called it big data. But as we got through the integration, as we got through understanding how to use that, we are now at the point where we're actually generating content. Instead of just waiting for someone to stare at the screen, if you think of it sort of like the air traffic control, we're now at the point where we say, what should we generate to a supplier? What message should we be sending to a retailer proactively to help them understand the backlog? What messages can or should we be sending to the factory floor based on to adjust production times based on what we expect is the inbound shipping supplies based on routes? Many of us have done that via workflow. That concept's not new. What is new is the ability to actually generate that, not based on a set of rules, but based on learned behaviors. And so all of this is being done on a platform that we invest in, but that we don't own, which is known as OpenAI. OpenAI, as its name implies, is AI that has their own mission. Microsoft is both a significant investor, as well as we have the commercial rights now to offer OpenAI in a cloud service. That cloud service is the Azure OpenAI service. So if you'd like to use the consumer service, like Chap GPT, which is based on the GPT-4 engine, when you first played with it, it was the GPT-3.5 engine, or you want to generate code without having to write a line of C, or even Power Platform, which is our low-code tool, or the images that I showed you earlier, DALL-E 2, you can do that through the consumer channel. But keep in mind that everything you put into that becomes part of the training model. That becomes actually a contribution you're making to the trained model in the public domain effectively. So many of you may not like the output that's coming out of the model that's been trained on millions and millions and tens of millions of public interactions. You may want a tunable model as well as a secure private model so that nothing you contribute is contributing to the knowledge of the greater world. It's contributing to your knowledge for either specialized advantage or adherence to your cultural or procedural models. So Azure OpenAI is a way to leverage all of the capabilities of what you'll see in Chat GPT or OpenAI services like Codex or DALL-E, but able to maintain your culture, your values, your rules, and your IP. So simple examples, you might just ask it, and we'll be very simple. I have an ice cream shop, I need a tagline. Hey, we serve up smiles with every scoop. Hey, that's great, but if I want to write code, I might say, hey, I have a table. Can you create a SQL query for all customers in Texas named Jane? And it says, sure, I actually know how to do that, right? Or we could say, let's generate a picture. And you saw previous examples of that here. So when you start to think about how we personalize communications, how we can drive different pictures in marketing content, how we can deliver catalogs to zip code ranges or profiles of a customer, alter the images. People are very concerned about royalties because we can generate new images on the fly. And so things are changing. You can, this is a rather dense slide, but as you saw in that Copilot demo, you can say, hey, write this based on this document or include this so it looks like this. So you can offer what's called meta context, right? So say, hey, let's set some context. You're going to have a conversation with Dana. Let me tell you a little bit about Dana. Here's how Dana likes to think. And oh, by the way, we don't want to say anything that would be a little bit off color. But you could train her to be off color, which unfortunately many vice people have already done that. But you can make sure that it meets your company standards. And this says, hey, scoops of heaven in the heart of Phoenix. Different output, you can generate it again, you can keep going through this. So these are sort of fun conversations, but what can you learn as you think about supply chain and what we've learned? Every industry's playing with this right now. There's various products being included? Where are we building it in? What are the different services that are driving it? The customized content already adopted by CarMax is actually generating code for them and content for customer interactions, so that it's personalizing that content, not based on pre-done rules, but based on a large model of understanding consumer behavior and preferences. In healthcare, something I think every family has had to deal with is imaging. Whether it was your young child who may have potentially broken an arm on a swing, or it's someone who needs a scan. This is important stuff, but getting it scheduled, communicating has been both complex and time consuming. And so this is the workflow, right? Like, you got to schedule an appointment, you got to get the lab, someone's got to do the processing, the radiologist needs to review it, someone translates it, and then there's a readout to the patient. This is pretty common. So what we wanted to do was to say, hey, look, how do we take this process, tell it what we want, right? We want this translated into patient-friendly jargon in both English and Spanish, and then include links to public information so they can see it. You'll see there's a couple of slider scales here, but the report points out, hey, the brachial plexus and the whole spine of a 23-year-old female, the chief complaint was that right-sided arm pain, and the neurodectermal defect with a cystic collection. Yeah, it's not really that easy. So it's like, hey, you know what? We need to tune this, right? It came back and gave us additional links. But here we're able to say, you know what? You got to make this easier. You just simplify this. So the point being, it's not one rule. You're maintaining within the generative AI models, you're maintaining context throughout the conversation. So it now comes back and said, hey, we looked at your arm and your back, found some growths, right? And that might be causing pain. These are called this. And here's what you can do about it. And oh, by the way, here's the same thing in Spanish. So you can keep tuning this. And I think this would be a much nicer summary for an email to go to a patient, automatically generated. And you can have the full medical, legal, compliant, proper disclosure on the website. So you have the friendly T's, you bring them into the portal, and you have the full documentation, which is probably necessary from a legal standpoint. Which then brings us to, well, that's cool, but do I really trust my data? Do I really trust that the language model is not going to generate something? And that, like anything else, there is no yes, you should. You're just going to have to play with it and determine what your tolerance is. Find out those areas where you can practice it. But a couple of things that we're super proud of and we want to stress is that when you run the Azure OpenAI service, it is your data. It is not running in Microsoft's engine. The large language models are not being informed by anything that you might put into it. It's your Azure subscription. I use the term safety deposit box. Some people think of a bank, and I use that analogy for cloud services. If you have a savings account, you're giving your money to the bank, and they give you interest. Why? Because they sell your money to somebody else. Your money in the bank becomes their asset. That is 100% true of every consumer service on the internet. Everything you give them, type in, exchange, every interaction, every use case is their data, and they resell it. But Azure and Office 365 is a service from Microsoft that is a safety deposit box. Your little tenant is yours. What's in that tenant is never an asset of Microsoft. You're paying the service that we provide cloud services, and you have your slice within that, much like a safety deposit box. But for the training, so first and foremost, it's your data. But all of the fine-tuning that you provide stays in your subscription. And it becomes your IP reflective of your culture. And then as you want to protect that, device authority users, you'll understand this, everything around Azure, including the partner enhancements to that. So as you're generating learning based on IoT data coming from machine floor, transportation, ship-based cargo box centers, containers rather, or even retail output, you trust that data because it's been validated by device authority. The lessons learned from that data are your lessons learned. And so that's very important. And then on top of that, how do you use it? I'm not going to walk everybody through all 6 of our core tools, but understand that privacy and security, which we just sort of talked about, along with reliability and safety, that's just one part of the whole process here. Are we being inclusive? Is there fairness, transparency that this is being generated by the GPT engine? Are we holding ourselves accountable for what's happening? And moving through this is actually the hard part, right? And so we have a whole framework that you can find, Microsoft Responsible AI. It talks about how you can make sure from a foundational level you are compliant and you are safe. And then from an experience and a customer loyalty level, how you build trust through reliability, by being transparent, by being fair and holding yourself accountable, and having human insight where it's necessary. And so nowhere is all of those come together than what we found sort of in the classroom, right? And so as we think about how we use this with educators, how we might use this with a frontline call center worker, how we might use this with retail, how we might generate custom tools for customers, we are exploring this in the very protected world of education experiences with the faculty or the teacher as the primary audience. So how can we create new assignments? How can we help them generate multiple assignments for a massive class of students based on what we know about their reading capability, what we know their challenges and what words are hard, and then dynamically create exercises for every student, which historically would have burdened the teacher. And it's why we have what's called the factory model of education. Unfortunately, as factories have modernized, the education model hasn't really kept up with factory-based technology. So ironically, we sort of deride education occasionally, like, hey, everyone gets the same content at the same time, at the same pace. We all learn. The one variable in education today is performance, right? So everyone works at the same pace, at the same time, on the same content, but what varies is your performance. The right model, we haven't figured out a cultural and a funding-based model for it at scale, but the right model is what's called competency-based, which is, hey, your performance isn't a variable. And we see this in, say, martial arts. You're a black belt, you're a brown belt. The variable is the method you used to get there, the time it took you to get there, the exercises you may have done to get there. So if we can personalize learning or personalize instructions to the machine floor, we can always deliver a black belt level, or if we think about manufacturing or Six Sigma, total quality, we can always deliver that level of performance. It just might take us longer, or we have to do different exercises to get there. So that level of personal insight we are taking as we look at supply chain. So this concept of job to be done, being human-centered, how we understand who's the job, what's their primary role, what are they trying to do, and diving into the key personas that actually, this is the person we need to meet. What is the job to be done? What are their concerns? What are their frustrations? Then we can inform how we want that AI to be delivered. So as we wrap up, one thing I'll leave you with, which a little GPT function, this is a change management problem, far more so than a technical problem. We have all of the technical resources, all these clicks. You can link for business users that just want to become familiar with AI, for trainers that you want to teach up on Azure AI to teach others. All learners can learn, tech teams, but there's this great thing for leaders, right? And so I'll move through here a little bit. This is how we think of it, right? Understand literacy, get your data ready. If you don't trust your data, and then you can deliver the user-centered experiences. But management, there's the latest that I've seen is this conversation from Gerhard Bickel and Franziska Bohm and Andre Wheeler is this concept that narcissism is a good thing in leadership, and that to some degree an element of narcissism is actually what people appreciate in a leader. But we don't want egotistical maniacs. So how do we actually help leaders understand that their vision, their confidence, and their ability to learn, how would we help train them up? And how could we use Chat GPT to actually build curriculum to do and implement these kind of change management practices? So as we walk out today, I want you to sort of think about, yes, the possibility in supply chain where we can see and predict and generate better interactions with our suppliers, negotiate in real time for better pricing based on real-time market conditions, communicate to our retailers and end providers where the backlog might be, how they might want to generate a promotion on demand should inventory be high, generate content for that promotion on demand. But we need the leadership understanding, and we need the ability to have the growth mindset and understand how to shift culture as we move into this generative AI model. So here's our course outline to improve everyone, and I'll open it up for questions from the audience, and I hope and thank you for your time, and hope this was a fun half hour for you. And if there's no questions, then that means you're still contemplating. But Tyler, thank you very much. Jose, or Louise rather, thank you for your time. I'll hang out for an extra minute or two should any questions come in. But other than that, enjoy the second day of Device Authority Show, and thank you again.